It's not easy being a kid in Hawkins, Indiana, what with all the attacks from supernatural creatures. But did you know that it's also not easy being an actor on Stranger Things? From specific language on what to say in interviews to haircut bans, let's take a look at some of the strict rules that the cast on this monster of a show have had to abide by. In an era of spoilers and leaks, studios try to keep their content under wraps until they decide to release it, and Netflix is no exception. The cast of Stranger Things are given explicit orders to keep details about the plot, and the show in general, a secret. But it's not just a simple statement they agree to. They're each given specific instructions on what they are allowed to say in interviews, and maybe more importantly, what they're not allowed to say. This was revealed by actress Francesca Reel, who said each of them got a sheet emailed to them that outlined the no-nos and yes-yeses of Stranger Things info. Then there's the fact that when Netflix sends out publicity screeners to the press, they password protect the files. That way, if anything gets leaked, they'll know who leaked it based on their personal password. But apparently that wasn't enough for Netflix, because when it came to their own cast, they reportedly didn't even give them passwords. Yep, the cast had to wait, just like the rest of us, to see their beautiful faces on Netflix when the show got released each season. Speaking of keeping things under wraps, there's reportedly a strict no cell phones rule that the cast has to abide by. For starters, it reduces the chances of someone forgetting to put theirs away, aka so there aren't any shots that include an iPhone popping up in a show set 40 years ago. It's also so the actors can feel even more like they're in the 1980s. Obviously, their characters didn't have cell phones, so not having them on set potentially makes them feel more connected to the role. Plus, it helps them stay present on set and more in touch with their coworkers, because apparently human interaction is easier without simultaneously doom scrolling on social media. Who knew? But the no cell phone rule is mostly there because Netflix doesn't want photos or videos accidentally leaked out. So the actors are asked not only to keep their cell phones off set, but also not to take photos and vids of behind-the-scenes stuff. Plus, they're given strict guidelines about what to post or not post on social media. So, since they can't be on their phones, they can focus on more important things, like their hair. Or actually, scratch that, because they're basically restricted from messing around with that too. The haircuts in Stranger Things are obviously all 80s specific, so nobody is allowed to do anything drastic to their hair without running it by production first. But the biggest restriction is on Joe Keery. Of course, for anyone who has actually seen the show, that's probably not a surprise, because Joe was blessed with the dreamiest of dreamboat heads of hair, and one that looks like it was specifically designed to be in Stranger Things. Joe's styled hair is so important to the show, he's not allowed to get a haircut without explicit permission from the powers that be. But perhaps a small price to pay for being gifted those luscious locks. Joe and the other boys also have to pay a small price when it comes to their physique. Because the show centers around a group of kids who are pretty slender, that has essentially become as much of an artistic element as any of the costumes or sets. So the Duffer Brothers, who created the show, are keen to keep that aesthetic going. That means the boys on the show aren't allowed to gain a lot of muscle mass, which can be a bit tricky for kids who are going through their teen years, what with puberty and all. But they're asked to keep skinny to the best of their abilities. The only exception to this was Dacre Montgomery, who played Billy Hargrove. Dacre was told early on that his character wasn't a part of the No Muscles crew and that he was free to get as jacked as he wanted. But it's not just the male cast members who have these kinds of rules. The girls, and everyone else for that matter, are not allowed to show up to set wearing makeup. This rule didn't always exist, but one day while filming season 1, Millie Bobby Brown showed up in makeup that had some glitter in it. And as we all know about glitter, that stuff is hard to get off completely. Apparently, just getting her back to normal took an extra 45 minutes. That delayed the entire day of shooting, which, as you can probably guess, cost the studio money. And that's a no-no, people. So from then on, the cast has had to show up fresh-faced. It's also because the makeup in the 1980s was a lot different than it is today. And since the makeup pros working on the show have that nailed, the producers would rather they do it than rely on the actresses to do it. Speaking of relying on the acting cast, they aren't explicitly asked not to take other roles, so that's good. But at the same time, they aren't totally allowed to do whatever they want. Before signing on to do any other acting projects, they have to check in with the Stranger Things scheduling department first. And if there's a conflict, they have to say a polite no to the other project. so that can be somewhat limiting for a show that doesn't exactly look like it's shot in 3 weeks, right? Finn Wolfhard actually had a situation arise where it was looking like he'd have to choose between taking his role in the movie It and continuing on Stranger Things. And apparently Finn was about to say bye to Stranger Things. Nobody wants that, Finny boy. Fortunately, it all worked out, because Stranger Things ended up going on a shooting hiatus for a year, so he never had to make that call. Phew.
Thanks.
Okay, so now that I know the lengths everyone is going to just to give us this amazing series, it makes me appreciate Stranger Things even more. I just wish I had Joe Keery's hair. I promise I'd never cut it without permission. Have any thoughts about the cast rules on Stranger Things? Pop them in the comments.